Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of CX Behind the Scenes. This is where we go behind and beyond the slogans and really dig into what it takes to design and deliver experiences that matter. I'm Carl Chemise, your host, and I'm glad you've chosen to spend this next hour with us as we continue into our third season, episode 9. Imagine that, third season, doing this almost 3 years. If you're back with us again, thank you for being part of this ongoing conversation. If this is your very first session, special welcome to you. You're joining a vibrant and growing community of CX professionals who believe in sharing openly, learning from one another, applying ideas in the real world. And also, just remember, all of our past episodes are available for replay at questionpro.com if you want to catch up with past episodes. A quick little bit about me. I lead Horizon CX. We're a consultancy who helps organizations not just talk about CX, but actually embed it into their business in ways that sustain and endure. Over the years, I've built and delivered the CX Pro certification program, which has now certified more than 185 professionals worldwide. And I've also offered 2 books to support that journey. One is called CX Pro, a practical guide for the new customer experience manager, which pretty much parallels the course. And the other one is called CX Pro Beyond the Basics, Advanced Insights for Customer Experience Professionals. And that's a collection that brings together insights from 16 leading voices in the CX space. More recently, I launched a new course called Effective Customer Communication, and that is built around the idea that clear, humane, and impactful communication is the thread that runs through every great customer experience. And that brings us to today on CX Behind the Scenes, where we trade theory for candid dialogue with the practitioners doing that work every single day. So as you listen, I encourage you to participate, add your thoughts in the chat, challenge what you hear, make this a shared learning experience, because these sessions are at their best when we build them together. So what I want to do right now is turn it over momentarily to Chris, who's going to give us an introduction to CX Pro for those who may not know. Hard to believe, if that is hard to believe, but there may be a few out there.
Thanks, Carl. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of CX Beyond a Function, Building a Thriving Ecosystem, Season 3, Episode 9 of CX Behind the Scenes. I'm Chris Diakuski from the Customer Experience team at QuestionPro, proud sponsor of this series, and I'm excited to be kicking us off. If you've ever run a CX program, you know the tension. The dashboards say one thing, but your customers sometimes tell a different story. Metrics like NPS and CSAT matter, but they don't always capture the bigger picture of how people actually experience your brand. That's why today's conversation is so important. We're going beyond scores and surveys to talk about CX as the operating system of your business, how it connects your promise, your operations, and your people. At QuestionPro, that's exactly how we think about customer experience. One of the ways we help our clients put this into practice is through our journey management tool. Instead of just looking at feedback in isolation, we help organizations map the full customer journey, spot friction points, and align teams to fix root causes, not just react to survey results. Because when you see the whole journey, you can design experiences that truly meet customers where they are. And that's what drives loyalty, trust, and growth. Now I'm thrilled to hand things back over to our host, Carl Chemise, and today's guest, Jason from Everwise Credit Union, to dig deeper into CX can become this ecosystem that powers your entire business.
Thank you, Chris. Well said. Okay, before we dive into today's conversation, let's start with our usual quick poll to frame this discussion. Because we're exploring a big question today, is your program really working the way you think it is? And you mentioned it, Chris. Metrics like NPS and CSAT might give a snapshot, but Jason's here to challenge us to think bigger and view CX as an ecosystem. So, Paulina, you're going to run the poll right now, and I will do the same. I will participate in the poll as I usually do. I'm going to use my phone to gather that from the QR code. I see my name come up here, and I see Chris's name come up. I see a couple of others there. Jason. We got to have a few more here. I guess we can start it now. Okay, so the question is, when you think about your organization's SCX efforts, what do you believe is the biggest barrier to creating a truly human experience, human-centered experience? You focus too heavily on NPS metrics, the CSAT. Teams aren't aligned, too many silos, struggle to design, leadership not willing to face the difference between perception and reality, or operational constraints such as risk, compliance, and other things that limit what you can deliver. So it looks like from the 7 we have, the very top one here is our teams and functions aren't aligned, followed by leadership unwilling to face uncomfortable differences. Yeah. Pretty interesting, not unexpected, pretty interesting. So today, I'm thrilled to welcome our guest, Jason Gooden, who is Director of Member Experience Design at Everwise Credit Union, a $5 billion institution. Jason joined Everwise in 2024, immediately following an organizational rebrand with the mission of building a CX team that could unify business units, embed human-centered design throughout the enterprise. This work isn't just about touch points or listening posts. It's about orchestrating true customer-centric ecosystems that proactively shape experiences across the entire system. Jason brings over 20 years of experience in financial services, spanning lending, frontline management, HR, operations, customer experience, and even a stint in strategy consulting. That breadth of experience and perspective gives him a rare ability to see how every decision creates ripple effects across the organization and ultimately across the customer journey. He has a real talent for clarifying complexity and turning it into actionable strategy, making the daunting achievable with a systems perspective. And I like that word, just by the way, systems perspective, and a relentless focus on the human at the end of every transaction. Jason also happens to be a lifelong learner, holding a master's degree in customer experience from Michigan State University. One of the first, I understand, Jason, right?
Second cohort.
Has a stack of certifications across CX, service design, journey management, change management, and behavioral science. And when he's not reshaping customer experience at Everwise, you might find him chauffeuring his kids, riding his bike, catching live music, maybe playing some music, maybe happily surrounded by books. Jason, welcome to the program CX Behind the Scenes. Great to have you here with us.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Appreciate it. Good for the
opportunity. What else are you up to? I mean, I mentioned a lot of things there, right? Okay, so outside of your work schedule, what else excites you?
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, we covered a few things there. So I've been a cyclist for a long time, and that kind of got put on pause during my master's program, which ended last autumn now. So that books and my kids have been everything this year. And then finally getting back to a bunch of concerts. So I'm in Chicago right now, and I'll be back next week to see Elbow on tour. Yeah. Pretty stoked about that.
So that master's program was a pretty unique one, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was the first of its kind. Tom DeWitt, founder, program director, guru of the program, and champion of it, really. from what Tom had said in his research, he thinks there's maybe a program in Spain at that master's level, but couldn't quite confirm it. But outside of that, nothing else appeared.
There you go. So let's thank you for that. Let's start here. In the CX Pro program that I run, I use a quote at the very, anyone who's been through the program will remember this. It was a quote from Steve Jobs. And he said, you have to start with the customer and work your way backward toward the technology. That's what he said. And I believe it. So when you say there's a human at the end, always a human at the end, what does it look like in practice, to have that reverse engineer mindset, so that you can take those projected human outcomes and then filter that back to business operations? How does that work? How does that work? How can you do that?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that quote from Steve Jobs, because so often when I'm introducing this work, like when I came in my organization, I did my roadshow and started meeting new peers, stakeholders, people that know parts of the business. They've forgotten more about those parts of the businesses than I'll ever learn. I would share that quote from him every single time, and I've got a slide that has existed in so many decks. I guess I'll start off with this. Nothing I say today is likely to be revolutionary. I'm not bringing grand slams to you. I'm bringing Moneyball, appropriate today with the start of.
I'm glad you said that, because in my mind, there's nothing absolutely new in this space. Right. Really, we talk about a lot of the same things over and over again.
Right.
But I think the problem is we've yet to learn to apply the things that we know to be true.
It's very.
I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, you're good. You're good. So I am, so I just want to be right up front about this. What you will hear from me today is simple, not revolutionary, but sometimes what happens is when we get an organization involved and a business involved, we make the simple things weighty and complex. So that is foundational for me, is the simplicity in the work. And also you won't hear me talk about like, okay, I'm jobs to be done certified as well in Eckert Boom's who's been here in his process. So you'll hear people that get into the weeds of Ulrich's way or Clayton Christensen's way. I don't really care, in all honesty. To me, there's not an ideal process. There is not a perfect journey mapping process. Sometimes we get a little bit territorial in the CX space about the right way to do things. You're not going to hear from me today about a right way to do things. I'm going to talk about things that are kind of guiding, and the very beacon of that to me, the light at the end of the lighthouse, is the customer. So when I talk about there's a customer at the end of every transaction, and we have to start there and work our way to the beginning and what stresses them out. You would note, and I've worked in financial services for 25 years now, I guess in total, since I was a freshman in college. And one of the things that is very clear in this space and in this industry is the weight and the gravity of what we do that makes an impact on the lives of real people. So from a financial services standpoint, and what drives me missionally is you look at in our country, half of marriages end in divorce, 70% of people live paycheck to paycheck, 30% of those make $100,000 a year plus, I believe the number is, something substantial. For me, what that looks like for the customer at the end is financial stress lives throughout pretty much everyone that we serve.
Yeah.
If I'm not coming in, my business isn't coming in with that understanding, we're missing the boat on how we can serve folks. But it's not just financial services, it's every other industry as well. So to me, what is super important to recognize is that we're emotional creatures as humans, and no matter what business we're working in, there's emotion tied to it. If it's if you're a director in a B2B environment or a procurement leader in B2B, you have the emotional stress that comes along with, am I being successful at my job? So the essence of all customer experience work to me is starting there, knowing that there is something that keeps our customers up at night and stresses them out, and then working to resolve and help with that stress. So I'll give you a quick example here of something we're working on right now.
Yep.
When I came on board at Everwise, one of the things is I did some data analysis, which led into a UX review, which led into some customer research. Was our new account application process was clunky, dated, chunky. Essentially, for those that may work in e-com, our cart abandonment rate was really high. So we're in process of, we've secured a vendor, simplifying that up front, turning what was a lengthy application into a couple minutes. We'll be integrating automated approvals and all of that along the lines. Sounds great, right? But here's the reality, like on the lending side for us, somebody's not looking to just get a loan and get a loan approved. What it looks like is you have humans, individuals who may be looking to secure money to get that first car that gets them to a job, that allows them to provide for their family. You may have somebody who is looking to leverage some equity in their home so they can pay for an adoption. These are real human events. So by starting at that very end and understanding that, what it allows us to do is look and say, this is not about the application. What about the things that follow the application? All of those operational bits, like collecting income and validating who the customer is, securing the collateral, say, in the event of a home or an auto, and finding ways to speed and smooth that process so they can get to their end goal quicker, and that we don't add that additional stress and add more to what keeps them up. And there are so many examples. I've got 3 other examples teed right up that I can give you right here from within my company and outside of it altogether. But that's the starting place.
Yeah, it's interesting because it made me think back to the times that I was in sales for a bunch of years, and it was a custom-built automation product is what I was selling. But think about that for a moment. It's not off the shelf. It's not this transactional widget that I could, kind of deliver to you on time and when you need it to do to a particular thing here. But it was because it was in the chemistry world, there were certain procedures that had to be performed, and they wanted to automate that procedure. You had to really understand. Boy, talk about a lot of emotion involved in a purchase like that. Because This was back in 1984, 85. It was a brand new technology. People were like, it's robotics. I'm afraid of that. It's kind of like AI today. I don't know too much about that, but I'm going to take a risk over here. And you had to really get on the side of the customer in their shoes to understand the emotions they were going through. I'm going to make this decision to do business with you. I don't want this to fail, because if it fails, then I'm going to be looking bad in my organization. So I can really relate to that concept.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And there was a client I worked with in fleet management. So long and short, you see construction trucks on the road. Somebody's got to procure those trucks, but then also add things like toolboxes and ladder racks and specialty lighting and all of that to it. Well, it's an incredibly complex process. Many vendors involved, multiple steps. As I was working with this client, we realized that the linchpin was these fleet managers who got all the pressure inside their organizations, from drivers to CFOs to frontline managers who needed people in trucks to get out to do jobs to create revenue. So when we recognized the stress that my client's process was causing on the fleet managers, and that they were the linchpin for the entire thing, we could solve their stress and streamline processes, and then make it so they would become an advocate for my client when the next contracts came up. But it was really starting with that recognition. This is B2B, B2C. humans involved in it all.
So critical. Let me kind of change gears a little bit here. You talk about institutional courage. You talk about the need for humility and radical honesty. Radical honesty. What does institutional courage look like in action? Especially when gaps between perception and reality are uncomfortable, like we asked in the poll question. So how does that? What does it look like in action?
So we started talking about Steve Jobs, right? You quoted him right off the bat. And let's be honest, how many apples are there out there? Can we really step back and go they provide an Apple-like experience? I'm thinking just a handful. There's what your Ritz-Carltons, Lexus, maybe Chick-fil-A, Fellow Coffee Company is my favorite. These ones that are incredible at what they do. Most of us are not that.
Right.
So let's start there and recognize that when we think that we're competing with some of those giants, there's a reason that they're giants. And there's a reason that we don't have the reputation for that. And that's an okay recognition. That's a reality of where things are at. Somebody has to be the first one to acknowledge that and state it and make it okay to recognize that there are gaps, that we can experiment with things, and some experimentations are going to not work out. But it's okay. It's okay to try some things that fail when the stakes are low enough. Somebody has to be the very first one to be uncomfortable with that. And I think as a CX leader, there's a unique place that I have to be able to do that. So our friend Lou Carbone often talks about go in and act like an alien, like it's your very first time seeing the business, your very first time being in the place, like you don't know how anything works. I sometimes will refer to myself as the useful idiot from that standpoint. Like I don't know all the parts of the business. I don't know how every bit of operations works, especially the compliance side of the business.
Yeah.
I have a relentless curiosity to learn. So it's that courage to first speak up and say, help me understand how I think things work out. We've done some loose process mapping. We've looked at customer data, but can you really make sure that help me make sure that I'm understanding this all correctly? And then what it does is it turns it from bringing a problem to someone and instead taking a step back and saying, I need you to help me figure out how we can understand this thing and address it. Data absolutely backs that. But Brene Brown has this thing where she talks about when there's a problem in front of two people, if you focus on who's going to solve the problem, then you just focus on the cause of the problem and never get to it. But if you step back and take the approach of it's out there, this is a mission for us to do together, then you reorient your thinking. But somebody has to be the one to step up and do that first. And then the more it happens, the more you normalize it in meetings and in the room.
I like your use of that phrase, help me understand. And it reminded me of a person I worked for many years ago. In fact, at that company that I mentioned, which was laboratory automation. And he would always, when you were discussing with him, he goes, so help me understand, whatever the heck that was, But it was a really effective way to really open communications. And that's something, again, I have this effective customer communications course that I teach as well. And that's part of it too. It's part of that phrasing, you know what I mean? Because you have to open that door to, we're in this together, we're collaborating. And it's all about, it's asking a question, but asking it in a non-threatening way. Help me understand, because alternatively, if you said, what do you mean by, it's almost a challenge, right?
Right.
Is it help me understand? I'm having a little trouble with that. I need to understand that better, And it opens the door to communication.
Well, and frankly, if you're uncomfortable with it, as I know many folks are, there are some tools out there that help with this. So I'll just throw one out there, the sailboat retrospective. If you're a Miro user, you can find templates for it. It's pretty easy. To go back to consulting world, it's the 2x2 quadrant. But it helps guide that conversation. So it's a good starting point. If just from a relational standpoint, having these kinds of conversations gives you anxiety. It's a great tool to build into building up the muscle.
Let's go back here to an ecosystem view. So we talked about this. You described CX as a business operating system rather than a function. And I'm thinking, again, systems thinking in my mind. Can you explain what that shift in mindset means for leaders who are still focused on departments and metrics? I mean, obsession with metrics.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, every business is complex in its own way. But if you were really to deconstruct the whole thing, it's like those little 1x2 flat Lego bricks where it seems inconsequential. Each decision in the business may seem inconsequential, but over time, those darn things stack up and they build something, regardless of whether it's what you're looking for or not. So I'll give you a tangible example here of what I mean. Over time, this becomes the brand. And we oftentimes don't actually know what the brand is truly comprised of. So in my organization, we're 5 to 5.5 billion in assets, which sounds like a lot, but actually in financial services, that's it's inconsequential to these $170 billion banks. And we have like 800 employees, which also, that's not nothing. But like I said, we're not the largest organization, but even us, we did an exercise recently where one of my teammates asked him to go out and just kind of map the organization. When the customer thinks about who Everwise as an organization is in their mind, i.e. who represents Everwise to the customer, what does that look like? And what that looked like is everything that you would expect traditionally: retail branches, contact center, chat, all of that stuff. But then what are those other internal teams that we weren't thinking about, who actually still end up taking direct customer calls at times? There are a boatload of operations teams in there. Well, then let's extrapolate that out even further. What are the ones that occasionally do? Your legals, compliance, maybe, on a rare occasion. And then let's look even further. What are the vendors that we outsource certain things to that represent the brand? What about the technology that our members directly interface with? It was incredibly complex. And I want to say that it's upward of 40 to 45. We mind mapped it out and I lost count, frankly, of all that represent us. So that's a very high level view of the ecosystem. Well, then what do you do about that? You recognize that we think we're providing this kind of a service and this kind of an experience, but it's happening over in these areas, these touch points. But what about the vendor who creates a communication for us? So in our world, our digital banking vendor, you do a transaction, they send out a confirmation of that. If it goes awry, if there's an error or something, do we have control over that? Is it representative of our brand? Is it in the brand voice, the look, the tone?
Yeah.
Do our employees know about that when the member calls and has an issue? Or are they starting over? So from an ecosystem view, it's taking that lens and then very strategically selecting, the old Pareto principle, the 80-20. What are the few things that are driving the bulk of our issues? And let's build those the right way, while we look long term to then start creating the consistency of brand that a company like Apple and Chick-fil-A offer.
Yeah, it's like you as a company, you are an organization, you are what you do,
mm-hmm.
and you are whoever you engage to help you do it.
Yeah.
It's all connected. You can't just kind of point the finger over here. I worked in the financial services local bank here for a while, 5 years ago, so I can relate to some of those things. We got some audience questions coming in here.
Okay.
And so we have one here from Amr, and this person asks, what is the best way to convince a customer that growth depends mostly on improving the customer experience? It's the best way to convince a customer. I mean, I think in an organization, I imagine talking about the organization, not the customer of the organization, right?
Yeah, I'm guessing, that Amar is referring to leadership in the organization
Yep.
and convincing them. So if we start with that position, I mean, let's be honest, every organization, even I'm in a credit union, we're technically non-for-profit. We still care about profit because it keeps our employees employed, right, and it's an important thing. So your leadership everyone is going to give lip service and say that they care about customer experience.
Yeah.
But what they really care about is what is driving my profits. So here's one of the things that I have found very helpful when I was in consulting, when I was in retail banking and moved teams and worked with new teams. And then when I came into my organization, the very first thing I did when I came in this organization for the first month, literally it was my entire first month, was just going out and meeting different leaders and having time with them and chatting about what does your department do? What does your role do? You specifically, what does your team do? Let's break this down. What actually constitutes success to you? And that it turns the equation to, you're there to understand and act as a partner to help them do better in their role, to make them look good, and then make the connection to over time, as you've got the relationship built, these are the areas that our customers are struggling with, that I think you have this knowledge, you have this expertise, you have the people on your team that can help us overcome that. And when we do, you win in these ways. It makes your team more efficient, or this problem that keeps coming up that you feel the pressure on, we can relieve that and help take it away. But you've got to be a partner to do it.
You mentioned a couple of key words there, over time, which kind of makes me think about this whole concept of customer experiences. It doesn't deliver necessarily immediate returns.
Right.
You're not going to get it next week or tomorrow or the next month. Mm-hmm. It's an investment. So I think that's part of the question too, because, people in business and they're focused on profitability are looking for more immediate results.
Yeah.
And time is a factor in customer experience, as I've learned over the years. It's
and it can absolutely be iterative.
Yeah. Yep. Let's see. We have another audience question here. Jason, you talk about CX as an ecosystem. How do you get leaders away from being fixated on NPS and CSAT? How do you get them away from that fixation? And I can tell you personally, I brought NPS into an organization in my heyday. And I rued the day I ever brought it into the organization, because it became the thing, right, fixation. And it was now a challenge on how successful I was to stop the fixation and start looking at the reality of what this means.
I'm going to be honest with this one. I have been more of a puppy learning to walk on a leash than I have been one fighting it, than I have been one that just learns to live with it. And what I mean by that is, we all know that NPS, OSAT, CES, any of those big top level CX metrics on their own are problematic when they become a focus area. And we can fight it as CX leaders and try to get rid of it. When you may have a board or a leadership team that is using one of those metrics as a way of, simply assessing success or measuring themselves against others. It's not, and I've been learning over time, it's not worth fighting it, but here's what is worth it is, don't put your focus on it. Instead, like when I talked about the lending or the online account opening example, What I did is I made a connection, and I think anyone who's listening to this can translate this into their own business. I made a connection between that experience, that journey, and the end result of profit, and essentially lost profit opportunity. Cart abandonment, meaning people who wanted to become our customers weren't becoming our customers. So what I did is, in mapping that out throughout the entire application and noting specific points of dropout, and connecting $1 to every one of those. When this happens and we lose this percentage of applicants, this is the amount of revenue that's gone. This is the amount of revenue. But then being able to take that and to weave in not just profit, but the true customer experience side, give session replay that would show the true pain on screen that people were going through. And what that did is it allowed us to kind of reorient and reframe that from satisfying the customer through an application process to how do we actually help people successfully get through this. And what that's doing now is we have different metrics that are tied to the success of this project than some CX metric that doesn't tell the full story.
Yeah.
You may have to do that a few times with a few wins throughout the organization to start shifting the thinking of your leadership to downplay NPS as the go-to, but instead amplify you as a solution consultant of sorts and a partner in that.
Yeah, when I was in corporate, we used to use this metaphor of the bucket, or the bucket theory, as we called it, right? So there was water going into the bucket, that's your revenues coming in, and then there's these holes in the bucket, leakage, which is defection and attrition. So we needed to look at it more in that fashion, because in that particular business, recurring revenues. So once you put a particular system in a building, or a building controls company, you got recurring revenue from inspections and repairs, and that was a huge part of the business.
Mm-hmm.
You had to really look at that leakage at the other end, and that was one area we could always tie to CX.
Right.
That leakage, not so much the water going in, but the leakage coming out. So if we were more effective at preventing that water from leaking out of the bucket, we could show that customer experience was actually at play to kind of curb it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you can focus on specific behaviors as well, and that becomes the more interesting conversation. Because you can coach to it. You can't coach to NPS. Like you cannot in a vacuum shift NPS on its own, but you can help people in their respective roles do things that influence the retention and acquisition.
Yeah. It's so hard though when the obsession is so strong though, because at one point in my career, I was told, you, Carl, need to take this NPS at this value and bring it up to this value over here. Like as if I could actually do that.
Right.
As if I had a way to do that. So that was mission impossible. And of course it was impossible.
Right.
A lot of the partners I work with actually too, Jason, I mean, they have that metric tied to like their bonuses, you know what I mean? So whether it's like an you have to hit a certain NPS score to get your quarterly bonus or your yearly bonus. So, I mean, what do you see in that sense?
And I'm going to be honest. I mean, that is part of ours also. It's a very small percentage of ours, but it is a part of ours. And as the person brought in to build a CX team, it's something that I wouldn't recommend others do, but it is my reality. So those that are in this boat, I'm in it with you as well. But here's my approach to it is I put very little focus on that NPS number. We still report it out because we need to, but instead what we're focusing on more within the traditional survey is you can slice those things any way you want. You can slice the fact that most of your survey respondents are probably a very small slice of your customer population. You can try and fight all of that, and it's not really going to get you any ground with your team and your leadership. But what you can do then is focus on, because your survey probably includes some more behavioral based questions. What are the things that the employee did? Did they provide you with an accurate answer, or did you have to call back at another time to get this resolved? Put your focus on those instead, and put the focus on the person at the end of it. When our customers say that they've had to do these things, imagine what frustration that causes at the end. And then also connect it back to another business metric. So now all of a sudden you're continuing to kind of deflect that focus away from just NPS to, we know that you care about NPS, but here are the things that influence it and drive it. So let me help you fix those things first.
The tip off that I get whenever I'm asked for a survey, and I look at that very first question, if that very first question is the NPS question, I almost shut down immediately, because that tells me that's what you're most interested in.
Right.
Now, in my CX Pro training course, we have some exercises that we do when they build a transactional survey based on an internet service provider call in the call center. Okay. And they construct a survey based on that interaction and stuff. And it's interesting that more recently in the courses I've been teaching, that when they designed their survey, the students are putting, the first question is, were we able to solve your problem during your first call to us? And I'm like, bingo. That to me is the most important thing, because if you weren't able to do that, why do I care about all the other stuff, right? Because that's only feeding what I want, not what you want.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and and part of that motivation is probably also tied to survey dropouts as well. So what is the most important information that will help you do something different than you're doing today? Let's get that out of the way up front.
Yep. All right, let's get to a couple more questions here, because I see them over here. So we have another question from Samantha. Asks, in your experience, what is the most effective way to break down silos and get different departments working in harmony toward a shared customer objective?
I love this one. And it's because, honestly, Samantha, I think this is where my superpower is as a professional. I start here. Like I had said earlier, I don't know everything. And even if I did at one point, like I was an expert in lending or in operations in the past, it's changed. What I knew isn't what is today. So when I start there and set aside the ego that I've got answers, and then start with curiosity instead, and model this. I'm not saying that I just do this one-on-one. I try to model this in meetings. I'm the first one to say, oh, I got that wrong. Starting with the recognition, everyone in that room is an expert on something that I am not, and normalizing that for the whole team. And going in, like I had noted earlier, when I understand the definition of success for the people on the call and what's stressing them out, I have an opportunity to help them start solving problems and make connections throughout the organization. So then it becomes a matter of, I understand these people. We're helping each other understand what is in front of us. Now let's map out across the system what is going on. And when I say that, I'm not talking about a journey map per se. Yes, at times, but more often than not, it's a very loose process map, if you will. And I'm not even talking about like a super well mapped out BlueWorks driven style process map. Something that's very basic and loose, where I'm getting across the organization and connecting those points of stress between the CX leaders through that process map.
Yeah.
Then leveraging the relationships to pull them together and solve things, bringing in data points that start to tell the story. And I'll just say, I see X, Y, and Z in the data. Are we all reading this correctly? You all know this better than I do. I think the process works this way, and I think it's supposed to do these things, but is it really happening that way? And what that does is now all of a sudden, like I had noted earlier, that focus on the issue instead of each other, it changes the trajectory to where I've subtly kind of slid in. This is what we're trying to do and solve for together. And it totally breaks down some of the silos. I'm seeing it so much now in meetings where the longer I do this, I start to hear people asking the questions that I would have asked earlier on in projects. And what I love so much about that is I can just kind of step back a little bit and then, inflect a little bit. I can, the color commentator, if you will.
So you're modeling the behavior and they're following suit.
Yeah.
And I think that's I don't know, call that a magic answer to Samantha's question, but it's the best answer to that question right there, is modeling that behavior. I'll have to be honest with you. If somebody, says to me, something, if I was conversing with somebody who was an expert at journey mapping and they said to me, well, nobody knows journey mapping better than I do, I shut off completely because I'm like, wow, no ego there. So right. I want to hear people who have some ideas, but maybe they're not entirely 100% sure. But you were right, asking questions, that's a part of communication. I'll go back to my effective communications courses. That's part of what I think a lot of people are missing. They want to be in tell mode a lot,
right,
rather than ask mode. And tell mode only basically kind of limits a conversation. If you get into ask mode, opens up all kinds of possibilities. So
right.
Anyway,
Samantha, and that's the thing is like sometimes when you want to be in that tell mode, it comes, I think, to give us all credit, from a good place. We want to share knowledge. We want to share. We're excited about this thing that we can do that we're really good at. And damn, that journey map looks really good on Canva or Smaply, or whatever tool you're using. It looks so cool. And you just you want to share that. But then also think about it just from a human perspective, that expert who wants you to feel like they are the expert on something. We all shut down, at that point.
Yeah.
But when they come in and they share their knowledge in a way that is subtle and it connects to you and tells the story, it gives, to use that businessy term, insight, which is really telling a narrative-driven story using data points. Now, all of a sudden, you're starting to see something new, and it piques your curiosity. And if they're doing it humbly, accepting something you have to offer that adds to it, now you're working in sync and you're going someplace together.
Absolutely. Okay, I see another question here. This one comes from Angela and asks, if you had to choose just one place to start building a strong voice of the customer program, whether that's surveys, social listening, or frontline insights, where would you begin and why? Wow, what a great question that one is.
That is a good one. So if I were to break it down and only have one source, it wouldn't be surveys, because you're only hearing from a very small portion of your members, and they're only responding to the questions that you're asking them. And let's face it, it's a dying medium. Like in our case, 80% of our surveys come from 40% of our customer base, if you slice down the demographics. So it only gives us so much insight. So not there. Social, you've got to be, it's super important, but you've got to be careful there as a singular source of reliance, because that's unsolicited feedback. And think of unsolicited feedback. There's what's driving you to go to Yelp and leave a review. You're probably on one extreme end of the emotional spectrum.
Exactly.
Frontline is the place. If I'm going from those three, and honestly, I think if I lined everything out, Frontline would probably be the place to. This does two things for you. You get context that you're not seeing anywhere else because they know things that you're just not necessarily seeing in the data. And also by including the frontline folks, you do that relationship building thing that I talked about, and you amplify employee experience by, as long as you act on it, by showing your teams that what they have to say matters and that they become part of the change process. Now that said, I wouldn't do just that. There's behavioral data that you've got, transactional data that you've got. Leverage that. Leverage things like chat transcripts. You can use Copilot to do some analysis on those. Not perfect, but it does a better job than trying to scan those yourself. But start triangulating some of those things. It's Moneyball. You can hit a few base hits that'll get you moving.
Right. One more that I want to ask you, and that is this: is for those listening who feel stuck in that metric-driven reactive model, what is one practical first step that they can take to start thinking towards this ecosystem approach?
So I kind of touched on this with going and building those relationships, but lay it out in a structured process. So one of the things that I have found successful in the past is using a Miro or a mural. Heaven forbid if you have to use it. Microsoft Whiteboard will do as well. And build a template out that you use at the beginning of any initiative that you are connected to. And lay this down. Who are my stakeholders involved in this? Individually for each of them, what, like I noted earlier, what does their team do? What is their role here? What constitutes success for them? Do the same thing. Who is the customer in this? And be specific enough about that. So this idea of user versus customer, you get comfortable with that idea. Who's actually using your product versus maybe who's paying for it, because the user is the important consideration here. Lay this out as well. Now, what are we trying to accomplish? This is like another area of your board as an organization. Now, how well do these things align together?
Yep.
That becomes kind of your starting point, if you will. And you can do this in a very quick conversation or conversations with the project manager, with leaders. That becomes a point of truth that you then step into your first initiative meeting with and say, this is how I understand things are going. Like, I think this is what we're trying to accomplish as a team. Are we all aligned on that? And that will save you so many problems going down the road, and you can design and build the right way out of the gate instead of fixing things later. And then that sailboat retrospective that I had noted as well earlier. It's a great kind of center point of this template to use as well.
Thanks very much, Jason. We're getting towards the end of our hour here, so I want to do a little bit of thing that I started a few months ago called a lightning round. This is where I ask you for snappy answers, quick answers to simple questions here. So here we go. Number one, if you had to eliminate one CX metric forever, which would it be and why?
NPS. I mean, email me and I could send you 10 academic papers that completely break it down.
Number two, in your harmony over talent metaphor, which instrument do you think CX professionals most often play in the organizational band? I mean, you know how to got to bring music into this.
Yeah, and we have to. And me being a big music aficionado. My gosh, I just mispronounced that twice.
I'll help you.
Fix that in post. I'm going with bass guitar on this one. Kind of laying down that backing beat that you're there, you're important, but don't take the spotlight.
That's a really good answer. I like that one a lot because that bass guitar and that bass drum pedal, the drummer, they're in sync. Man, everything else is going to be fine.
Right. Yeah, we so often want more cowbell and
more cowbell. Number 3, what's one everyday example outside of financial services that you admire as a truly human-centered experience?
Fellow Coffee Company. And my God, I could go on for an hour and a half about Fellow.
I think you told me about that before.
They're absolutely fantastic. If you look into one thing with Fellow Coffee Company, know this, they know their user, which is people like me, total coffee hipsters, looking for your hyper local shop, beans roasted in very specific ways, ordering internationally. They know their audience, their user. They don't roast, but they partner with roasters. And every Tuesday they do this program called the Tuesday Drops program. The design of that alone gives you some insight into how the company works overall. It's unreal.
Cool. I've written it down, Fellow Coffee Company. I'm going to check them out. That's one of my takeaways here today. Number 4, we're almost done. In your experience, what's the smallest change that created the biggest impact on customers that you can think of?
The smallest change with the biggest impact. Man.
That might require a little too much thinking.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I know brevity is the wit of soul, but it's not my strong suit, man. I have too many thoughts in my head for that one, honestly.
Okay. Well, and people can contact you and get those thoughts out of your head if they want to.
LinkedIn away.
Number 5 and last one, if you could give every CX leader just one new habit to start tomorrow, what would it be?
It would be starting with, as Dan Heath says, read the book Reset. Number 1, do that. Came out earlier this year. And actually, if anyone wants to email me, I did a book club on this, and I summarized the entire book into about a page and a half per chapter. Happy to email a Word doc of that to anyone. But start with the end objective, or what Heath calls the goal of the goal first. Keep asking the question. Peel it back. Is this what we're really trying to do? I think we're trying to do X. What are we actually trying to accomplish? Keep doing that with the focus on the impact to the customer, so you get your next initiatives right, and it'll start aligning people.
Well, we could go on and on and on here, I suspect here. But anyway, we need to come to closure here. This is our hour. And I want to now ask everyone here to mark your calendars for the next episode, which will occur on October 28th. That's another Tuesday. It's the same time as we're doing here. And my guest then will be Sarah Andrews. So Sarah is going to bring her expertise on human-centered design in the public arena. Something a little bit different, a perspective that highlights how design thinking and CX principles play out in government. Wow.
Sarah's a good friend of mine. Tune in for that. She's awesome.
There we go. There we go. And you're absolutely right. And that promises to be a fascinating look at the challenges and opportunity of applying CX in environments where the stakes are much higher and the outcomes affect all of us. So thank you again, Jason. Chris, thank you for hanging in there and being with us and asking.
That was my pleasure. My pleasure. It was a blast. And it was great to hear from both of you.
Yeah, Thank you for having me. It's fun.
Yep. Thanks, everybody, and I'll see you next month on CX Behind the Scenes. Cheers, everyone, and happy end of summer. Over and out.